Aloha, thank you for joining us for the Hawaii Early College Convening. We would like to remind everyone that today's presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the event website. Please keep all cameras off and all microphones muted throughout the session if you would not like to be recorded. Artificial intelligence will be providing live captioning for accessibility purposes. Captions may not accurately reflect what is being said. Captions will be corrected for session recordings. Recordings and resources will be posted to the site between 3 to 4 weeks after today's presentation. If you have any questions for today's presenters, please add them to the chat box and we will share them at the end of the session. Without further ado, I'd like to bring up to the stage our awesome group of presenters.
Hi everyone, welcome to our session, Considering the Future of Online Early College Programming in Hawaii, Lessons Learned from an Evaluation of the Transition to Online Learning During COVID-19. We're excited to have you join us today to learn more about an external evaluation conducted of the transition to online learning on early college programming in our state, as well as hearing about some of the great collaborative work occurring to advance online early college opportunities through the partnership between Maui College and Lahainaluna High School. So next slide, please. Before we get started with sharing more information, we wanted to take a minute to introduce ourselves to you all. So Christy, can you introduce yourself first?
Yep. Hello, I'm Christy Arakal. I'm the College Career Counselor and the Early College Coordinator at Lahainaluna High School.
Hi, I'm Nicole Atwood. I'm the Early College Program Director at Hawaiʻi P-20 Partnerships for Education.
Aloha, I'm Kulamanu Ishihara. I'm serving as the Interim Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at Maui College.
And aloha everyone, I'm Wendy Vincent, Interim Administrator for the Career Readiness Section in the Hawaii State Department of Education's Office of Curriculum and Instructional Design, which includes the Early College Program. I'm pleased to be with my colleagues to share the work that we have been doing related to online early college programming and improving the online learning experience for our students. Next slide, please. Nicole and I are going to start by providing an overview of the work we've been engaged with related to an external evaluation of the transition to online learning that occurred in spring 2020. We'll provide you with some context for this work, share information on the scope of work, and highlight some of the major findings that came out of the evaluation. We'll then hear from Christy and Kulamanu about how they have been working to support students in the online early college space and their thoughts on the future of this work. And then Nicole and I will share some final thoughts about how we'll be using the evaluation to further work in the state to better support early college students as online learners before all of us take questions from the audience. Next slide, please. So let's start by quickly addressing why we were interested in conducting an external evaluation. Next slide, please. When all classes transitioned online in spring 2020, we were particularly concerned, next slide please, about our early college students given the purpose of the program and the target populations that we seek to serve, notably economically disadvantaged Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students, groups that are traditionally underrepresented in higher education. And we knew it was going to be challenging for many of our students for a variety of reasons, and it was important for us to provide students with an opportunity to share feedback about their experience, including concerns and suggestions for the future. Nicole and I, along with Dan Rampala, an evaluation specialist at Hawaiʻi P-20, worked together to develop a survey to administer to early college students at the end of the spring 2020 term. And this survey then became the basis for the additional end of term surveys that were developed. While our overarching goal for all of the surveys was to utilize student feedback for program improvement purposes, each survey had a different focus, as you can see. And in spring 2020, we really wanted to hear about students' experiences as a result of transitioning to an online format and whether any adjustments could be made for fall 2020. And then in fall 2020 and spring 2021, the scope of our survey work also included collecting information on online learning during the pandemic in general, as well as how our unique population was doing in meeting the demands of early college classes on top of coping with other stressors during the pandemic. Next slide, please. Across all of the terms, we asked students to identify the benefits of taking early college classes in an online format. And many students felt that taking early college classes online actually opened up more time for them and gave them flexibility. They felt like they were in a position to better engage in their coursework when they were at their best, and they could carve out time when they were able to really focus on their coursework and have less distractions. Now, these students were more comfortable engaging with their instructors and peers in an online format and felt safer from both a health perspective and a social emotional perspective. These students ultimately felt like the experience was helping prepare them to be better learners in general. Next slide, please. On the flip side, students did not like losing in-person interaction. Some of our students did not like losing in-person interaction, whether it be with their instructors or their peers. There were also challenges related to technology, and for students not used to taking classes online, they had difficulties adjusting to the format, particularly because it put a lot of responsibility on them to be self-directed. And so in fall 2020 and spring 2021, we saw that students ended up saying that they were really fatigued from having too much screen time, and that wasn't surprising considering that in those terms, students were spending the entire semester online as opposed to spring 2020. And what we asked students to more generally comment, yeah, next slide was great, thanks. What we asked students to more generally comment on in those subsequent surveys was to comment on their experience as learners during the pandemic, including any stress that they were experiencing and any suggestions they wanted us to be mindful of for early college programming. Now, what emerged through their feedback was really a reinforcement of what we just saw with the benefits and challenges of taking classes online. For students that had positive learning experiences during the pandemic, they discussed feeling less stressed, having more opportunities to focus, flexibility to self-pace. They really felt like they were strengthening important skills like time management and becoming more independent as learners. And for these students, the move online also reduced their anxiety since they felt safer at home. For these various reasons and more, they felt comfortable engaging online, preferred to face-to-face. Now, the students who had difficulty with this learning experience during the pandemic really talked a lot about feeling isolated. That was the thing that came through most significantly. They missed having interactions with their peers, instructors. Many students felt like they were more anxious and depressed. And as a result, it kind of led them to feeling unmotivated. So in spring 2021 specifically, we honed in on some of this feedback that we'd received in earlier surveys to ask students about issues that they felt were causing significant disruptions to their learning. And the top 3 issues that they identified were mental health issues, caregiving responsibilities at home, and a lack of a quiet, dedicated workspace. I'll turn it over to Nicole.
So in addition to the feedback we received from students in the surveys that Wendy just mentioned, there were a range of concerns and questions raised by individuals involved in supporting early college students at both our high schools and our UH campuses. The feedback clustered into a few main areas, which you see here on the slide. The first is course accessibility, and included in this were things like technology support for students. So do students have access to computers, relevant software, consistent internet access that they need to access the online early college course? In addition, technology support for instructors. So what sorts of support did instructors have to transition their early college classes or just classes generally online and to teach in a solely online environment? The second area where a lot of the concerns and questions were raised were focused around student readiness and skills. So in addition to all of the concerns that I know some people have about whether students are ready for a college class generally, because it may be more rigorous than their high school experiences, that was amplified when the classes transitioned online by readiness for an online college class. Do students understand what skills they need to be successful in an online class, particularly an asynchronous online class, which was quite different from like the face-to-face format where they were interacting with someone live, and what sort of environment is actually best for our online learners. Another thing included in student readiness and skills is the ability to balance or handle various stressors. So Wendy mentioned someone she was speaking earlier, but there were a lot of things happening for our students, as I know you guys all know, as well as for all of us involved in supporting them when the COVID-19 pandemic started. High school classes also transitioned online. Parents or other siblings might be working or attending school from home, and younger siblings might need support with their online learning. And there might be other life stressors in the family, like illness or death of a family member, reduced income for the family, or a need for students to work to supplement lost parental income. So there were a lot of concerns raised about whether these will negatively impact the students' ability to create an environment for themselves online that's conducive to online learning. And the last area was support services. So that kind of groups into concerns raised about academic supports. So basically, like, how are we providing academic support services online to students? And will all students be able to access these? Will they have the bandwidth to participate in Zoom meetings? Are there going to be conflicts between their online high school classes and support services offered by UH campuses? And in addition, there were some non-academic challenges that were raised anecdotally by individuals, like, how are we providing holistic support to our students? Are these available online? And will we be able to be proactive with our outreach to students to make sure that they feel supported? The bottom line in all of this is all of these concerns that people raised is basically trying to figure out, did the transition to online learning for early college result in decreased participation and or decreased success rates for students because of all of the stressors that we mentioned for students? And did those enrollment, participation, and success rates impact certain groups of students in particular, so those underrepresented in higher education? And so are we negatively impacting equity through the transition of early college classes online? Because people were reporting things like, I'm seeing fewer Native Hawaiian students participating. I'm seeing fewer male students participating. So we were interested in constructing an evaluation to answer some of these questions. So Hawaiʻi P-20, in collaboration with the Hawaii State Department of Education, contracted with an external evaluator, RTI International, on a short-term formative evaluation, which started in spring 21 and concluded in spring 22. This study specifically focused on examining the effective transition of courses online during the COVID-19 pandemic on Hawaii's early college program, and had four main aims. One, to identify the challenges associated with the transition of all early college classes online and the impact of this transition on student participation and success rates in early college classes. Two, to determine the kinds of solutions that were developed to meet these challenges. Three, to highlight key lessons learned related to online early college courses. And four, to recommend next steps to enhance student access to online early college courses. Next slide, please. Okay, so we contracted with RTI International. They did this multi-method short-term formative evaluation for us. What did the scope of it look like? So it was multi-method. We included both quantitative and qualitative data. So some of the quantitative data included was student-level early college participation data, tracking students' early college participation and outcomes from summer 2018 through spring 2021. And this data included all students who participated in early college at a public school, Hawaii DOE or charter during this time, as well as qualitative data, which includes the surveys of the UH early college instructors, as well as high school early college coordinators, and focus groups of UH early college coordinators and high school early college coordinators. What else did this include? So we looked specifically through the quantitative data at enrollment and course success. And so we disaggregated that by a variety of characteristics. So we were looking at student characteristics like race and ethnicity, sex, economic status, and grade level. For school characteristics, we were looking at things like whether the school was a Hawaii DOE school or a charter school, a Title I school or a non-Title I school, and locale. And by that, I mean, like, was the school located in a city, a town, in a rural area, or a suburban area. And we looked at all of those things because we were trying to figure out, like, were there different impacts in participation or course success for those different student or school characteristics. And we also looked at subject area, where there were differences in enrollment and course success by certain subject areas, as well as were there differences in enrollment or course success by modality. So were synchronous online courses more likely to yield higher success rates than asynchronous online courses? Next slide, please.
So to ground RTI in the work we are doing in Hawaii, Nicole and I participated in several interviews to provide them with necessary context for this evaluation. We helped them understand how the early college program is structured in our state, which is very different from how dual enrollment programs are structured in other states, as well as provided insights into our student population and secondary and post-secondary institutions and the partnerships that they have. It was particularly critical for RTI to obtain feedback from those working directly with students and learn from their observations and experiences working with students during the transition. So to do this, Nicole and I worked closely with RTI to develop surveys that were ultimately administered to UH faculty and public high school early college coordinators. We also worked with RTI to develop questions for focus groups that were conducted with UH early college coordinators and a representative sample of DOE early college coordinators. Questions focused on the challenges that they encountered, lessons that were learned, and thoughts about best practices to enhance online learning. Now, the facilitation of these surveys and focus groups occurred in January and February of this year. The faculty surveys were sent to all UH early college instructors who taught early college in the 6 terms that occurred during the period spring 2020 through fall 2021. And the high school coordinator surveys were sent to all high school early college coordinators within the DOE as well as charter schools across the state. RTI facilitated the focus groups online via Zoom. Overall, we had good response rates for both surveys. 82% of the high school early college coordinators responded, and 40% of the UH instructors completed their respective surveys. It is worth noting that of the 683 UH instructors included in the survey sample, approximately 40% were not teaching in spring 2022 and therefore may not have seen the email with the survey invitation. So 40% response rate is actually quite good. We had solid participation in the focus groups. 2 focus groups were conducted with DOE high school early college coordinators and included 13 total participants. And 2 focus groups were conducted with UH early college coordinators and included a total of 9 participants. Next slide, please. We want to acknowledge some of the challenges as well as limitations of this evaluation. For the duration of this project, Nicole and I routinely met with the evaluators for progress updates, as well as to do whatever we could to support them in their efforts. We did hit quite a few bumps during this process that ultimately delayed the overall timeline. So that was definitely one of our biggest challenges. Due to when data is available, it was not possible to include data after the spring 2021 term as part of this evaluation. So some post-spring 2021 data will actually be included in another section of this presentation, but keep in mind this data is limited in scope and will only include data provided by UH sources. Since spring 2021 was a much more COVID impacted term than the fall 2022 term, there may be additional solutions and strategies developed beyond what actually ended up making it into the evaluation report. And the ways in which online early college classes and the support that accompanies them are now offered may have already changed. In addition, because data for students not participating in early college was unable to be included as part of this evaluation, enrollment in early college could not be calculated as a percentage of the whole Hawaii public school population. And so tests of statistical significance were not able to be run on all of the data. Due to restrictions in our data sharing agreement, we also were not able to provide the raw data from the student surveys that we administered in spring 2020 through spring 2021. So RTI worked from aggregated data that was provided to them. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and move into, next slide, please, some of the data and major findings from the evaluation. So we'll start with the surveys. I'm going to just expand on the major challenges that were reported. For high school early college coordinators, the major challenges were helping students figure out how to access and use learning management platforms like Laulima, as well as software and programs and tools. That was the biggest one. Having limited access to students for recruitment, registration, counseling, advising, academic checks. And then addressing reliable internet connection and general technological issues for students. For UH instructors, the major challenges were ensuring that content delivery for online early college classes were as engaging as the content delivery for face-to-face early college classes, ensuring that student to student as well as student to instructor interactions were comparable to face-to-face early college classes, and then addressing technology access issues for students. Next slide, please. Although the transition to online learning posed very significant challenges, there were also opportunities to adapt practices. So high school coordinators indicated that their schools began offering increased levels of support services to students, and communication with UH instructors encouragingly increased, to help get a sense of student progress during this transition. Next slide, please. UH instructors, I think, reported similar effects. And while in-person support obviously decreased, online support increased, as well as general communication with high school support staff and students. Next slide, please. Because focus groups were conducted in January 2022, the participants were able to reflect on their experiences transitioning from in-person to online early college programming at the start, when we all shifted online during the pandemic, as well as their continued offering of early college courses throughout the pandemic. Key findings featured on this slide are inclusive of the focus groups conducted with both the high school and UH early college coordinators. And while it was clear across the focus groups that everyone became more comfortable with offering programming online as time went on, it was really with the caveat that students would be best served in future offerings to have additional supports, such as a dedicated point person, most likely at the high school level, to support online learning, including tutoring and occasional in-person support. Next slide, please. And I've said this before in other settings, but I believe we were already headed toward making a concerted effort to increase online early college programming prior to the pandemic. However, the pandemic accelerated this journey for all of us and really provided a crash course to folks about how it could work and what it would take to really successfully institutionalize it. Nicole, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Wendy. Next slide, please, Leanne. Okay, so now we're going to go into some of the data, everyone's favorite part, I know. So bear with me through the next few slides. I tried to make this as clear and easy to read as possible. So what happened with our student enrollment and success rates when we transitioned to online classes? So I just want to make a quick note about this slide and the next slide. It actually includes data from two different sources, which are very comparable, but not identical. So the first is data from fall 2018 through spring 21 has been provided through our Hawaiʻi P-20 data team, which matches UH data against HIDO data. Unfortunately, there wasn't sufficient time for us to pull data from additional terms after spring 21 as part of the evaluation. So the fall 21 and spring 22 data you'll be seeing on this slide and the next slide came directly from UH's Office of Institutional Research, Analysis, and Performance. So this data is basically showing us that, of course, as we all know, like we were trending upwards in the terms before the pandemic. So our enrollment numbers would not have been impacted in spring 2020 since our COVID-19 pandemic started in March, so halfway through that term. So you can see from fall 18 through spring 20, we were swinging upwards in terms of the number of early college classes being offered per term. We did see a dip for fall 2020. We went from 216 courses across the state to 170. But since then, we have rebounded. And actually, in the spring 22 term, we had 228 early college courses being offered. So we are above the levels we were at in spring 2020. Next slide, please. Okay, if we look at the number of students enrolled in those early college courses, what's happening with them? So you can see, and this is kind of an interesting trend, is that we were actually pretty flat in terms of student enrollment numbers from fall 18 to fall 19. And then we had this uptick, I mean, moderately dramatic, like 300 students for spring 2020. And then we had a drop off in fall 2020, which would have been our COVID impacted term. And we have not yet reached our pre-pandemic enrollment numbers. So it's interesting because we're seeing a slight difference in the number of early college classes being offered and the number of students participating. So we've reached our pre-pandemic numbers for the courses, but not yet for the students. These are all unduplicated numbers, so I don't know if we have more students participating in more classes or if we are just offering more classes with fewer students. But this is what the data is showing us. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is looking at course modality, and how it changed over time. So I'm so sorry, this data is so small, but so everything that's in blue is the face-to-face classes that were being offered. Orange is hybrid. We don't offer a lot of hybrid, as you guys can see from the chart. Gray is online asynchronous, and yellow is online synchronous. So synchronous typically being offered by Zoom. So like students are participating in sessions live with their UH professor. Asynchronous meaning that they're basically just typically interacting with the professor in an online platform like Lahainaluna. So what you can see is that before the pandemic impacted term, for fall 19 and spring 20, and for the data for spring 20, we're seeing like before all the classes shifted online due to COVID. We had a ton of face-to-face classes. Almost all of the classes were being offered face-to-face. Since then, we've seen, we saw a dramatic dip in the number of face-to-face sessions, almost none in fall 2020. And then we've gradually seen the number of face-to-face classes tick up since then. We're at kind of like a 50-50 split between face-to-face and online for fall 2022, just in case you're curious. But what we've been seeing is that, of course, from fall 2020 through spring 22, most of the classes were being offered online with a slight preference, it seems like, for online synchronous classes as opposed to online asynchronous classes. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let's look at some of the outcomes by student characteristics. So I had mentioned that we were looking at things like gender to see if male students or female students were more negatively impacted in terms of both enrollment and course success when classes transitioned online. So what we found is that male early college enrollment was more negatively affected by the pandemic than female enrollment. So what you can see is actually this kind of an interesting trend, which I didn't realize until we looked at the data as part of this evaluation. We were actually trending up in terms of raw numbers for male participation through the spring 2020 term. And then we had a drop off for both males and females in fall 22, but it's hard to tell because these are raw numbers and not percentages. But what we're seeing is that these numbers have increased for females, right, in blue. And they've increased for males, but the rate at which they've increased for males is lower. So males have had a lower rebound in terms of early college enrollment than our female students. So we are not yet at our fall 19 enrollment numbers for male students. So we're starting to see what feels like a little bit of a shift of more female students participating in early college and fewer male students participating, which seems like perhaps the pandemic exacerbated that trend. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about early college enrollment changes for race and ethnicity groups. So while you guys can see basically like from spring 20 to fall 22, like this drastic dip for all of our populations, what's notable, I guess, to point out to you guys is we always have more Filipino students participating in early college. They're typically like our race ethnic group participating in early college the most, followed by Native Hawaiian students, white Asian students, white students, and then Pacific Islander and other kind of like fluctuates towards the bottom. What's notable is that everyone had a decrease down, but for fall 21, and it's hard to tell again because these are raw numbers, not percentages, but Native Hawaiian students actually had the greatest decline in enrollment from spring 2020 to fall 2020. It was 21 percentage points. And although Asian students had the smallest decline, they've also had the smallest recovery out of all of the groups. And then, yeah, sorry, we're running short on time, so I'm just going to go to the next slide. So if we look at early college enrollment by geographic location, I think what's notable and we'd like to point out to you here is that we typically have the most students participating in early college from suburban schools, that gray line. The yellow line is town type schools, the blue line is city, and the orange line is rural. So what you can see is there was actually a significant uptick for rural schools between fall 19 and spring 20, which was wonderful. And they did have an enrollment decline in fall 20, but they had a slight rebound in spring 21. We had our greatest decline in the number of suburban schools offering classes between spring 20 and fall 20, and we have not quite made up for that difference yet. What is interesting is that for our city schools, we actually had more of them offer early college classes in the fall 20 term than in the spring 20 term. I don't know why, but that's what we're seeing. Next slide, please. Okay, is related to the percentage of students earning a C or better in their early college classes. So our students taking early college classes in general do quite well in them. We kind of hover around an 89–90% success rate for the classes. You can see a slight decline between fall 19 and spring 20. And spring 20 would have been impacted by COVID because the students hadn't gotten their grades at that point. But then you can see that we've sort of bounced back, not entirely, but since that time in fall 20 and spring 21. I did want to note that we don't have any visuals about this, but there weren't as many statistically significant results by student characteristic and school characteristic as you might think. So the only statistically significant declines in the percentage of students earning a C or better in their early college classes term over term were a 6.6% decline from spring 19 to spring 20 by 9th grade students, which is not typically our target population for early college, as well as a 4% decline from spring 19 to spring 20 by our male students. So they had our male students, like their enrollment has been impacted and their grades did decline from spring 19 to spring 20. Native Hawaiian students also had a statistically significant decline of 7% between fall 19 and fall 20. So it looks like while their enrollment wasn't as negatively impacted compared to some other groups as we might think, their course success rates were. Okay, perhaps most concerning, sorry, Leanne, I have one more thing to say about that slide, is that when we're looking at the data by school characteristic, the most concerning data point that we noticed is that rural schools had a statistically significant decline of 10.9% in the number of students earning a C or better from spring 19 to spring 20. And they have not had a statistically significant recovery, unlike some of the other groups of schools and students we were talking about earlier. Okay, next one. Okay, this is interesting because I feel like a lot of us have been operating under the perception that synchronous classes are better, synchronous online classes are better because they more closely resemble a face-to-face class. I am not arguing for more like saying that synchronous classes are bad. Synchronous classes are great. And as Wendy will talk more later, I think whether you offer a synchronous or asynchronous class probably depends a lot on your school, your technology that you have available at your school and for your students, as well as how well you're preparing your students to take an online asynchronous class. But what we're noticing and what we wanted to point out here is that there really isn't a significant difference in success rates between online asynchronous classes and online synchronous classes. So you can see that data for both the fall 20 and spring 21 terms. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, last data slide. So in terms of students earning a C or better, we thought perhaps you might be interested in if we break down all of the early college courses being offered into different course categories and look at whether there's a difference when students take the class synchronously online or asynchronously online. Do they do better in one versus the other? You will have this slide deck later in case you would like to take a look at it. But basically what we're noticing is that there's no big difference between one term and another. So there's nothing we can really draw from this data beyond the fact that both synchronous and asynchronous classes are able to be successful in most of these spaces. Okay, I am going to introduce Kulamanu and Christy to take us away with their partnership spotlight.
Thanks, Nicole and Wendy. Again, I'm Kulamanu Ishihara from Maui College. Next slide, please. Okay. Just going to start with overall data that we have for Maui College, or some background information. So Maui College serves 3 islands. On the island of Maui, we are located here in Kahului. We have Lanai, we have an education center, and then we have the Molokai Education Center. We also have an education center in the remote community of Hana on the island of Maui. Our enrollment right now, we are 2,500 students, including 550 early college students. We have 2 Bachelor of Applied Science degrees that we offer, one in Applied Business and Information Technology and in Management. And then we have 17 Associate of Arts degrees, or a combination of Associate of Arts, Associate of Science, and Associate of Applied Science. We do partner with all Maui County schools, including our private schools, offering a combination of sheltered courses, or the students come here and take classes on their own. For the fall term, this year we have fall 32 sheltered courses that we're offering, and then spring we're projected to have 26 courses, and they range from the traditional courses such as English, sociology, psychology, and then we've got some CTE courses as well, such as Nursing 100 and Carpentry 120. Next slide, please.
Hello, I'm Christy Arakawa from Lahainaluna High School. Lahainaluna is located in Lahaina, Maui. Our school population is about 1,050 students every year. We are a Title I school. Our early college courses began in 2016. This year, we are offering 6 fall classes and 7 spring classes, all asynchronous, virtual, or hybrid. Next slide, please. In 2016, UHMC actually approached us with the National Science Foundation grant to have an ICS cybersecurity class. From that point on, we were kind of discouraged from actually having virtual or asynchronous courses. But that completely flipped once the pandemic started. But in 2018, we started offering a little bit more early college courses. Then in the spring of 2020, we actually got to visit Waipahu High School and got to learn about their early college program. And eventually, we joined their Early College 3.0 program, which I owe them so much. They helped form the framework for our early college program. And by entering or joining the Early College 3.0 program, we are now able to offer a whole variety of courses that we would not have been able to offer if not for them and their partnership. In the fall of 2021, we actually started to share one of our math courses with Lanai High School. Then this year, this fall of 2022, we started our first degree seeking and non-degree seeking program. And hopefully we are wanting to actually share more courses with Kulani Hako'i High School, which is the new high school in Kihei, Maui. Next slide, please. So some of our challenges with the early college classes that we wanted to offer was, I would say, a whole lot more before school started this year. We had to figure out classroom sizes, what kind of technology are we going to need. Last year, we started offering students, or all of our students actually, Chromebooks if they didn't already have a laptop, so that they can actually bring it to school and take it home. And the other problem was going to be scheduling with our bell schedule. Eventually, our admin was able to give us a nice big classroom. The cost of technology was another really big worry. But at the beginning of this school year, beginning of this calendar year in January or February, we were contacted by UH Maui College, and they let us know that they received a grant that would help us with whatever we would need to offer online early college classes. I didn't exactly know what that meant until they started to come on our campus and they wanted to measure the rooms and see what it looked like. Did several layouts to see what could be done. And then they let me know that they were going to actually provide us with a huge AC, which is a great plus because this room is the hottest room on campus. It averaged 100 degrees every day. So we were extremely happy about that. And then eventually they told us that they were going to purchase for us two 85-inch monitors and a TV, so that we were going to be considered more of a Zoom room. And they also gave us a microphone and sound bar, as well as a video camera. And I was worried we were going to have to use the Chromebook cameras for individual students, but thankfully that wasn't the case. So it's been since summer, everything started coming into this room, and I will show you exactly what the room looks like. I was able to take some photos. And one of the bigger issues that we faced was the scheduling. So basically high school schedule versus college schedule. So UHMC was amazing with that problem. I just had to turn over our bell schedule, and they were able to speak with their professors and see what they could do on their end to make sure that the professors were able to meet during our allotted times. So students in our early college program that are virtual or hybrid actually have it in their school day as a particular period. And that way students wouldn't have to miss classes. Professors were able to meet exactly at that time, and that's another huge part of our successful early college program, is that our school is located on the other side of the island from UH Maui College, and our local hub for UHMC actually closed down last year. So our students would not have been able to take any of their college courses if not for this particular room and this particular grant from UH Maui College. Another issue that we've all faced was Wi-Fi issues. So before the pandemic, wasn't so much, but after the pandemic, it has really been an issue. So that was another thing we would have to figure out with UH Maui College. After the school year started, and we didn't quite have all the technology in yet, so students were on their own Chromebooks and had to use their video cameras and their microphones on their Chromebooks. But the DOE actually locked down student Chromebooks and computers in classes so that students can't go to inappropriate sites, which actually blocked students from going into their UH emails. And because this was such a problem, UHMC came up with this awesome program, which is their VLab. So students create an account, and it's like a virtual desktop, a separate desktop on their laptops or their Chromebooks that they can go into. They can log into their personal emails and their UH emails to be able to do Laulima. Of course, that wasn't without issues because we were the first people to roll it out for them. There were issues, and they actually, UHMC brought to our campus the programmer and two of their technicians to kind of figure out what was going on, figure out the issue, figure out the bugs, and really perfected everything for that particular program. So it has been a huge help. They have also asked if we needed any other programs. Right now we have Microsoft Word on there and Adobe Reader. But if we needed anything else, any other programs that we needed run on that VLab, they would be able to put it on there for us. So that was a huge help. And then recently we've actually had issues with the professor end of the virtual classrooms. So on our end, things are looking good and fine, but the professor can't hear our students for discussions, or their audio breaks up on their end, on the professor's end. So we really will have to keep working and keep fine-tuning these little things. But for the most part, I would say 90% of the time, these classes go off without a hitch. And last but not least, it's the high school staffing. So pretty much there's just me at Lahainaluna High School. My office is located in the early college classroom, which is going on right now. And whenever I am absent, we're really in a panic to try and find somebody that can actually cover the room so they can come in and turn on the computer and start the virtual classroom with the professors, or open the door for the professor that comes on campus. So it's kind of an issue right now on the high school end, trying to staff this online program, but we have been assured that things will probably get better and hopefully we'll be able to hire more people in the future. But yeah, I mean, none of this would have been possible without UHMC. They've been extremely helpful every single step of the way. Next slide. So you see the before picture, typical high school classroom, and the after picture, UHMC actually provided us with room dividers, and I was able to ask for red. And the room dividers are actually 20 feet by 20 feet. And then there's 2 8-feet room dividers, because we actually have the early college classroom, which is what you're seeing in the after photo. And next slide, please. And then that divider is dividing the College and Career Center side of the room, which is actually bigger than my old office, so I'm very thankful about that. And then on the right side, the asynchronous section is in the back of the room, and it's basically for students who are learning at their own pace. UHMC provided us with headphones for those students so they don't have to listen to professors that are talking on the other side of the room divider. So that was extremely helpful. And next slide, please. And this is the picture from the back of the room, facing the front of the room, and you can see the big screen monitor in the front, and we have a little desktop computer that's hooked up to it. It is a touch screen, so it's a lot more user-friendly. The professors are able to just touch the screen instead of walking over to the mouse of the computer. And then the back of the classroom, so this is what the professors see when they look to the back of the room. That white board in the back is actually another TV that we just kept covered for now because we don't have all the wiring for it yet. But it's a work in progress, but it's just amazing that they were able to provide all of this for us. So we really want to thank UH Maui College. And next slide.
Just a little bit more in depth on some of the or angles is that Maui College is approaching this for early colleges through this virtual desktop infrastructure. As Christy was mentioning, it's a Windows-based desktop running on servers that are based here at Maui College. It does offer Office 2019, Chrome browsers, Acrobat Reader, Adobe Creative Cloud, Wireshark. We do have some classes that cybersecurity classes, and so they, the hacking devices, they couldn't use that because of the firewalls, and so this is our answer to that, is providing this opportunity for them to use the virtual desktop. So I have a lot more information, but I'll skip over it for time's sake. We also provide Kāko'o online virtual support services. So this is based through our Learning Center and our library services. So students are able to virtually book online if they need any type of tutoring support. Our UH Education Centers also provide services to our students who are taking online. We do have a robust program out at Molokai High School, as well as Lanai and Hana as well. And then what Christy was mentioning, our grant, it's called Hokupa'a grant, and that is the grant to retrofit classrooms that are going to be used for early college courses. And so the idea of these classes is that essentially it's a Zoom classroom, and the teachers could teach from either from the high school, or they can teach from Maui College into that Zoom classroom, and it's two-way communication. So we're really what we call our HIT system that used to be what we used to use, and now we're using more Zoom classrooms. And then the last thing that we also provide for early college is we are using an early alert system created through our STAR Instructor Support app. That's been happening for about a year now, and we do provide feedback to the high schools in case students are struggling in the classroom. All right, and next slide, please. And then our future plans for Maui College is that we are interested in investing in early college personnel. We do recognize that it is a really big population of our campus, and providing support services for our students, especially on the retention side, and then transitioning them into college as well. We're exploring and expanding our CTE-related programming. So that's probably going to take us a little bit more back into the realm of synchronous or face-to-face classes, but there is a high interest in things like nursing and culinary. And then opportunities for shared online early college classes. So we are very interested in being able to provide those services to places like Hana or Kulani Hako'i, which is brand new and they're very small. So it's a great opportunity for them to be able to partner and still get the services for their students and opportunities. And then Maui College is also interested in addressing the college brain rate for our communities, especially the 49% that are not attending schools. We do have grants right now that provide what we call opportunities in college. And so an example of that was this fall break. We had students come to campus and they were able to participate in things that really are career ready, like barber, la'au lapa'au, culinary, auto detailing, and just those opportunities for students to be able to work after school and not necessarily the traditional college path right away if they didn't want to do that. So really trying to address all of our community. Next slide, please. And we just wanted to give a little bit, Christy and I were reflecting like, well, how do we make this work? So this is just our couple bullets. We communicate often via text, email, and phone. And then we do visit Lahainaluna, as Christy was mentioning, when we have tech issues or we can't figure it out. We will take the drive out there and make the time to figure it out. We build a rapport between our college instructors and the high school. So for years, we've had Dr. Nani Osman. She provides a series of psychology courses to Lahainaluna, and that is something that has worked out very nicely. And then we plan together. And so for Maui College, it involves us student affairs and academic affairs planning with Lahainaluna, who is the Christy for the counselor, the administration, and the registrar. And so really coming together at a team approach to address it. That's it for me.
Mahalo, Kulamano and Christy. Thank you so much. It's always so helpful to hear directly from partnerships about how they're approaching challenges that arise. And so we really appreciate that you were part of today's discussion. I do want to apologize for the audience. We may go just a few minutes over if you can bear with us. We're going to try to jam through the rest of this, and our slides, of course, will be available to you. So we might gloss over a few things. Next slide, please. So this is one of those areas I'm going to gloss over a little bit. I will say the evaluation report, we're going to shift back to that now. The evaluation report does conclude with a summary of the challenges that were encountered during the transition to online learning. I think those are pretty straightforward, and we touched upon many of those items already. I will say as well that the report in its conclusion also includes a summary of what they say are solutions, but I actually don't think they correlate with the challenges, and so it reads more to me like these are opportunities for the future. And so that's how I'm going to approach it and how I would encourage all of us to think about it. The pandemic accelerated the move toward implementing increased online learning opportunities, and everyone rapidly adapted and on the whole became more comfortable with it over time. And so some of the things that came out in relation to this are folks really thinking that it's opened up opportunities actually for both high schools and UH campuses to offer early college classes in greater numbers, since instructors don't have to travel to the different high schools, some of which are very far geographically to teach. And then many sentiments have come out of this work that more students can be reached via online learning, notably if they're from rural and remote areas. And then students themselves in the survey work that we've done indicated a desire to continue having online options available. So the pandemic, also opened up critical opportunities to examine our teaching and learning strategies and adapt to better reach and serve students, and that work should absolutely continue. There's also a sense that collaboration efforts and communication increased as a result of this move online, and particularly increased direct communication between high school early college coordinators and support staff and UH instructors. That should continue as well. Next slide, please. The report goes on to offer some recommendations for the future. These are pretty straightforward and self-explanatory, so I'm going to actually move to the next slide, which is Nicole's.
So what were some surprises that we had from the evaluation? So one of the surprises we had is that there weren't statistically significant negative impacts for students based on economic status. I think we were all kind of expecting that, and we didn't see that either for students based on their individual economic status or for students at Title I schools. Students at Title I schools actually had smaller enrollment declines and greater enrollment increases after COVID than students at non-Title I schools. Another interesting surprise that we had is that there were differences between some of that success data we presented to you earlier and high school early college coordinators' perception of their students from underrepresented populations. They said that their students from underrepresented populations were more likely to experience greater academic challenges with the transition of classes online, and the support success data did not show the same story. So what we're wondering is, did they anticipate that and provide more support services to those students, mitigating those concerns and resulting in the not statistically significant impacts that we saw, or was there something else going on? What we wish had been included in the evaluation is we would have loved more promising national best practices related to online early college courses, data from additional terms. It would have been nice to be able to compare course type and modality for multiple terms, since I just showed you guys fall 20 and spring 21. And it would have been great to be able to get faculty impact about the types of classes they think are best to offer online. And then it would have been nice if the evaluation had been able to make more connections to feedback expressed in the student surveys.
So given this, I think the evaluation opened the door we both think that the evaluation opened the door to a variety of future research and or exploratory opportunities. Notably, future research could examine whether the population of students served in early college courses changed as a result of the pandemic. For example, did students participate in early college courses after the transition? Did different students participate in early college courses after the transition to online learning that occurred during the pandemic? Additional research could also examine the kinds of challenges students in rural schools faced and identify additional supports that would help these students succeed in online early college classes. And then the males, male students were more negatively impacted as a result of the transition to online learning during the pandemic than females, and their rate of recovery was also less than females. So future research in this area could inform potentially, recruitment strategies for males. Next slide, please. So, these are interesting considerations as we continue the work that we've actually started work prior to and independent of this evaluation. Yesterday, Nicole and I shared information regarding work we have done with the UH Online Innovation Center to implement an online orientation for students taking an online early college course for the first time. We've now run 2 pilots, and we have a third pilot coming up ahead of the spring 2023 term. The feedback has been very encouraging, and we're thinking about how the orientation can sustainably be offered statewide. So if you weren't able to join us for that session yesterday, we hope that you'll check out the recording. Lots of good stuff in there. Nicole and I have participated in some of the partner discussions that have been occurring related to shared online early college classes. And I've also offered to facilitate some of these discussions to help me think about how we can provide state guidance on best practices and considerations that partners should take into account, since shared online early college classes require a higher level of coordination and support. It can get complicated very quickly, so it's important that partners have planned and discussed these arrangements with care. And we'd like to do some concentrated work with rural and remote schools to hear more about their challenges so that we can think about how to best support them, as well as think more generally about how we can engage with the field to build their capacity to support students in an online environment. And so I'm going to turn it now over to Nicole to share a little bit about the work we've been doing with UH faculty, as well as to close us out.
So related to the capacity building to support students in an online environment, one example is the UH Online Professional Development Program we've been collaborating with UH Online Innovation Center on. It's focused on helping instructors or faculty members who are teaching early college courses redesign their courses to support early college students in an online environment. They get a 5-week professional development to redesign their courses, integrating some additional success strategies specifically focused on the developmental level of high school students. And we've gotten some really positive feedback from the instructors who have participated so far, in that they felt like their courses were more engaging. The content was more engaging. They were getting higher levels of student engagement, both with them as the instructor and students with each other. So the application is open for that, and we'd be happy to send it out to you all if you're interested and you're a faculty member teaching early college classes. The last thing to close this out is that this is our first public sharing of the results of the external evaluation. So we will be publicly sharing the final report and an executive summary with you all very, very soon. We hope that you found some of the initial findings interesting. And thank you so much to Christy and Kulamanu for sharing all of the great work that you guys are doing at Lahainaluna and Maui College to really think about how to provide more online early college opportunities for your students. We are opening it for Q&A time. We're 3 minutes over, but if anyone would like to stick around and ask any questions, we're happy to stay for a few extra minutes. You can put your questions into the chat. And if you're interested in contacting us, any of us, you can find our contact info on this slide. And we see all the comments from the wonderful UH early college instructor in the chat, and we will reach out to you by email.
We also know it's lunchtime, so we know a lot of folks want to get out of here. So you're welcome to get in touch with us offline, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. We know we threw a lot of information out at you, but thanks for being with us, and thanks to all of the presenters for doing such a wonderful job. Thanks so much, everyone.
Hey, thank you all so much. That was an amazing presentation. I loved all the data, and thank you all for joining us for considering the future of early online Early College Programming in Hawaii session. Please complete the session survey so we can learn your thoughts and suggestions for the convening. So this concludes the Early College convening. Hope you all have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend. Thank you.